What up? This is Yinka Diz.
Peace, this is Outlaw.
And you listen to the 80s Babies podcast.
And on today's episode, we have a tribute for the fourth studio album, Things Fall Apart by The Roots, released February 23rd, 1999.
Yep.
And when I suggested doing this album, you were curious if we were doing a tribute or make it a classic. And I know that in the past, I've wanted to do this album. You were never really all that excited about it. So what about this album aren't you like excited about, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, this album is an album that I think I'm supposed to care about a lot more than I actually do.
That's fair.
Firstly. Secondly, I don't understand why this album absolutely has to be a tribute when albums like Be and Stillmatic have to be made a classic, right? So it's like,
got you.
Cool. I mean, I don't know. So I think I put the question back on you a little bit, that it's like I'd be interested to hear like why this album, and then why, what about it, I guess, really resonated with you that you would want to do a tribute for it.
Oh, well, first of all, before I get into what resonated with me, I think the reason why this album is better than the other two that you stated is particularly, you said Stillmatic, right?
I said Be and Stillmatic, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think, we talked about this. I don't think Stillmatic is a very good album at all. I think it has some good songs, and we don't have to relitigate that. We talked about it on the episode when we did Stillmatic.
Yeah.
B, I totally get it. I think the thing about an album like Things Fall Apart is, for one, this is the album that really kind of pushed the Roots into the limelight, into the front stage. It got everybody's attention. The other thing too is that I think there's something to be said for the context of when something is released, right? So we kind of talked about this when we were talking about MC. So it's okay, fine. Yes, Kendrick Lamar is a better MC than Melly Mel. But in the context of when Melly Mel came out and the context of when Kendrick Lamar came out, you have to give props for the originators. And I think that in an album in the 90s, I know this came out in 1999, but it came out early in 1999, right? I think that when everything is either very sample heavy based or the producers are making beats on their computer, to have a band making these hip hop records, which was something that, unfortunately, Black music had to move away from for a number of reasons, right? They took art programs out of schools and this, that, and the other. But making music with instruments, at least in terms of the hip hop fan base, isn't something that's really in our scope. And I think that some of the music that they were making here, you're on the verve of that neo soul music, the Soulquarian sound, right? I think that for this album to hit the way that it did, particularly with some of the hits that it had, and you have Black Thought that, even though he's not really talking about much, is still killing it. I think that in the context of this coming out in 1999 versus B coming out in 2006 and Stillmatic coming out in 2001 after Blueprint is I think there's kind of levels. I think there's a fair argument for B, like you're saying. I'm not particularly enthralled with anything that Common has to say on that record, with the exception of the very first track on that, which is, is a classic, right? But yeah. Whatever. I understand what you're saying. Nevertheless, though, I think the other thing too, real quick, the other thing too is that I'd be curious how many people think that B is Common's best album, whereas at least for a long time, Things Fall Apart was the consensus Roots' best album from people that I know.
That's true.
But you have different thoughts on that. I know you is it Falling Down?
Yeah, I like Rising Down.
Rising Down.
Yeah. But I feel you. I hear what you're saying. I think that part of my comment of the why I view this album the way I do is individual Yinka stuff. Part of it is, I think, maybe a comment about the Roots and their direction. So the first, the Yinka part, I'll talk about Unplugged. I remember when Jay-Z came out with the Unplugged album, and people were really excited to hear Jay-Z rap his bars over a band that we know playing his music. I didn't give a fuck about that. I never listened to the album. I like Jaguar Wright. But in concept, it's fine. But I never was impressed by live instrumentation for the sake of live instrumentation. And I feel while I give the Roots props for being a live band, I'm more impressed by a live band in a live setting than I am by a live band in a studio setting. And so typically, Yinka as consumer, I don't buy live albums. And I would say with the exception of, two records, one, Reasons by Earth, Wind and Fire, and two, Before I Let Go by Frankie Beverly and Maze, I can't think of many examples where I'm super excited about a recorded version of a live thing. Like I'd rather hear the studio produced version of something. And that's just me as a consumer. Tyrone. Okay, well, I also don't think I love Tyrone as much as you do as a rapper.
That's fair.
So,
but it's a good point though. Your point's acknowledged.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that's me, Yinka, as a consumer. Now, back to what we're talking about when we talk about Stillmatic and Be, and Like Water for Chocolate is probably actually a better example. But I don't think that what Black Thought is doing here is very transcendent in terms of as an MC. I don't think that he's created much for me to connect with as a listener. And so, the difference between Like Water for Chocolate and this album to me is that on Like Water for Chocolate, Common created a world where I understood what he wanted me to take away from his album and, where he was trying to go.
Okay.
I think Things Fall Apart, and I guess I'm kind of getting into a low light a little bit, so maybe I'm skipping ahead a bit. But Things Fall Apart it kind of gives me two concepts that exist in space somewhere. So typically I think when you have an album like this, it's set either grounded in reality. We're the Roots. We're from Philly. And so it's like, okay, cool. You're from Philly. Tell me about Philly and how you interact with Philly. So, it might be Philly is a really rough city. However, we're kind of nerdy, earthy cats, so we don't really interact so much with that piece of it. We interact with the bohemian flea market side of Philly. Cool, I get that. Or maybe it's shit. We out here busting our gun. Philly is real. Like, okay, cool. But they do neither of those. Fine.
Okay.
The second is create a fantastic world that the group exists in, and then tell me about the fantastic world. So I'll give you an example of a good version of that, right? The Alcoholics. So the Alcoholics, we know they're from LA, but like they're not it's gangs out here, it's crazy. They're not, it's Hollywood, we're trying to get involved in Hollywood. They're, the world is one giant frat party, and we are the most interesting guys at the frat party. Where if there's somebody that's drinking from the keg, it's us. There's somebody doing a keg stand, it's us. Like, we're these wild, funny guys who also happen to rap. Cool. You've created a world that's your version of LA, and I know how you exist in it.
Another good example of that would be someone like Wu-Tang. Wu-Tang did a great job of creating these atmospheres and these worlds.
Exactly, right? So it's like while they're from Staten Island, I almost don't have to really know anything about Staten Island because they've created their own Staten Island, almost Shaolin, and they're set inside this world, and I'm sucked into this world. The Roots do neither of these well, in my opinion. And so as a result of that, we know that they're from Philly. We hear, I'm from Philly here and there. We hear that they hate whack MCs. Cool. But other than the fact that they're from Philly and they hate whack MCs, I don't know shit about these niggas. And I listen to fucking an hour and a half of music where I know, like there's really like maybe one song, You Got Me, where I'm like, oh, okay, he dated somebody and this is his situation. Other than that, the niggas just hate whack MCs for an hour and a half, and I'm supposed to be like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, I don't know. So that's to be honest with you, how I really feel about this album.
Got you. All right. Well, why don't we get into the Where Were You? And I want you to start because the Where Were You, for me, I think is relevant as to one of the reasons why I rate this album so highly.
Got you.
But why don't you start it off?
That's fair. So, man, 99. I would have been at Oakton at the time, I want to say. So high school, Virginia, really interested in, underground hip hop. So to be honest with you, so I bought this album And it was fine. I probably bought this album around the time of buying a lot of albums. I do remember having Like Water for Chocolate. I do remember having Supreme Clientele. I remember some other albums in this time frame that I had. And I remember all of them a lot more than I remember this album. I remember having this on CD, and I remember I listened to The Next Movement a lot. I listened to Adrenaline a lot, and I was really impressed by the Beanie Siegel feature. I listened to Double Trouble. Yeah, like I probably listened to like 3 songs on this joint and then just took it out to CD like changer most times. This album wasn't something that like it individually resonated with me, but at the same time, it was almost like because of where I considered myself, where I sat, I had to buy it. And then I did, and I was like, okay, cool, I have it. But like, it wasn't a standout album for me personally. So that's where I was. Where were you?
So 1999, I think at this point, this is the winter of 99, February. As much as I enjoy like the rocket sound, and that is the sound that I'm discovering, I'm still heavily entrenched into Wu-Tang. Like, I'm not even sure if at this point I was a really big Biggie fan. In fact, I probably didn't become a really big Biggie fan until the latter stages of 99 or possibly even like the year 2000. So I'm still really entrenched into Wu-Tang, but I've also just recently discovered like Black Star and that kind of sound. And the thing is, like, I'm writing at this point. So when I'm writing, we talked about this before, how like we're battling to nobody in particular, right? And my brother, who had a lot of these hip hop albums and will play a lot of things, he's like, yo, like listen to this song, listen to this album, like it's really, really cool. And it comes on, and it's like the first 2 tracks, like the act 1, table of contents, right?
Yep.
And like hearing that beat and hearing Black Thought just like rip it, it's like, wow. Like I understand he's not really talking about anything, but if we're talking about like being transcendent on the mic, like, and there was a whole sector of like underground MCs, real hip hop heads who were just like rapping. And in my opinion, Black Thought did that kind of rap better than anybody. Like better than anybody I had ever heard. Better than anybody I'd heard online.
Really?
Better than, like, he was doing it. Like, I understand like Cannabis like has like these bars. I got that, right? Because obviously like Cannabis was dope. But just like flow wise and just like energy wise and voice wise, like Black Thought was just so seamless. And then some of the beats that they had on here, like I liked that jazzy sound. And so it just kind of resonated with me. There's a lot of songs on here that I like. There's a few that I don't. And the thing is, it wasn't even until like years later, because this is an album that I constantly went back to revisit because I enjoyed it so much. It wasn't until years later when I really was like, yo, he's not really talking about a damn thing on this album.
Shit.
Right? Which is a constant. We've mentioned that on this podcast a lot. He's really not talking about a goddamn thing on this album.
Yeah.
But it almost like doesn't really matter. Like because it's just, I don't know, it just sounded so good to me most of this album. So that's pretty much where I was musically, at least.
Do you feel like, we've talked a lot on this podcast about how music was like it kind of becomes a part of your identity, right? Some folks will have an album and they'll have that album displayed in their house because they identify with it, right? Do you feel like this album kind of attached to your identity at that time or does, kind of currently?
Absolutely. And I can say that with complete confidence because as much as I love this album and I do think it's a classic and I do think it's worthy of a tribute, I am also completely honest about like some of its shortcomings, right?
Yeah.
Like I am completely willing to bust the balls of this album and make fun of it for having very little subject matter. Like it's funny to me, but I don't care because I still love it so much.
Right.
So,
That's what's up. Okay.
Yeah.
So did you want to talk about the critical reception?
Yeah, let's talk about it. And I think that the critical reception of this album, at least when looking on the Wikipedia, was very good. Was it not?
Yeah. I think pretty stellar marks across the board. I think typically 4s out of 5s, 8s out of 10s. There's a 9.4 out of 10 on Pitchfork.
Yeah.
And then the album also made, multiple kind of best albums, greatest albums lists as well.
Yeah, I think the critical reception is was pretty good. All music critic Steve Huey hailed "Things Fall Apart" as one of the cornerstone albums of alternative rap, believing that it was the point where the Roots' tremendous potential finally coalesced into a structured album that maintained its focus from top to bottom. And
Okay.
then, this is from the wiki. So I'm just getting all this from the wiki.
Yep,
But then our dear friend Panama Jackson actually is quoted in the wiki, right? He's cited in the wiki,
What?
right? So, right. Yes, he is. Panama Jackson is in there. He's on the wiki. In the critical reception, when you go through there, he's on there, right? So writing for The Root in 2018.
Shout out to Panama. That's big shit.
Yes. Writing for The Root in 2018, Panama Jackson described Act 2, The Love of My Life, as one of the best beats in hip-hop history. It's so ethereal and beautiful and fit perfectly with the verses. So he's on there. So shout out to P.
Shout out to Panama.
Getting in the critical
That's
reception.
huge, yo.
Yeah.
That's huge.
I thought about actually sending you that article. I'm surprised that I thought that you would have seen his name in there.
Yeah, I didn't look at it, but I'm looking at it now. That's crazy.
Yeah, and oftentimes when we do the critical reception, we also like to discuss like how our friends feel about this album, right? Like our peers. And even if like not every Roots fan has this album as like their best Roots album, it's definitely like in their top like 2 or 3. That's saying something because the Roots have a lot of albums.
Yeah.
Right? I think they have at least, including their live albums, they have like at least 10, I would think.
I'm gonna keep it a thou out with you though. Part of that is people lost interest and stopped listening to Roots albums. So that's
fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
So let's get into our lowlights first.
Cool. Did you want to start or did you want me to start?
Why don't you start?
Okay. So my biggest low light is length. I think at this point the album is just too long. My second is lack of engaging subject matter. I said, you hate whack MCs, you have bars, what else? And let me expound on that point, right? Like,
yes, please do.
I was thinking about like why this doesn't really connect with me like as an album, very deeply, where albums like Strong Arm Steady and West Side Connection, which I know you're familiar with, at least what West Side Connection do a bit more. And I think, as I said earlier, it fails to do kind of what I would say the two ways of really setting the stage to create a group album that connects with folks, does. So it doesn't, to me, it doesn't do a great job of grounding in reality, and it doesn't do a great job of creating the world, which I talked about earlier. But I also don't think that like Black Thought as the lead narrator does enough to at least draw me into him as the lead character. And so, the group doesn't necessarily draw me into their story, and no individual draws me into their individual story either. And I think that's where I just don't really engage. So I don't know if you had comments on that before I move on.
Well, we talked about this before. We even already mentioned it on this podcast, this episode, that this album has a lack of subject matter, which is really unfortunate because the songs don't really tie into what you would expect the theme of the album to be, the packaging of the album, which is the packaging is one of my highlights, and we'll expand on that later.
Yes.
But the songs don't really go into that. And I think that when you talk about the grounding of the album, it's a very good point, because on other albums, they do that. Like, Do You Want More definitely puts us into the mind frame of like the Roots itself. Like just creating this like kind of like jazzy landscape for them, and just like who we are and what we love. Like they have a song called like It's a Lazy Afternoon, which is okay. Like I feel you. It's just like, day in the life of Tariq Trotter, and it's just a lazy afternoon. And it's just a cool song. Like that puts you in the mind frame of the Roots. I think that something like Illadelph Half-Life puts you into that mindset of like what Philly is like for them. And all of the mentions of Philly on this album kind of sound like it's an inside joke, or it's like it's an inside thing. Like you have to be from Philly, you have to be from their neighborhood to know what they're talking about. The rest of us just hear like Philadelphia, like, all right, cool.
Yeah.
What else is there? What else is there?
But
I agree with you though.
Yeah, I don't even know though that I agree with that point, and I agree with everything else that you
Okay.
said. But even the inside joke piece, right? Like, so for example, when I listen to Wu-Tang, right?
Mm,
They say things like "so" and the one
yeah,
six ooh and all this shit, right? And it's like,
yeah,
I've listened to them for so long that I understand what they're saying. But
got you.
initially, I knew that they were speaking a language of their Staten Island neighborhood,
Hmm.
and it sounded cool enough that I was like, oh wow, like they're linked into their neighborhood. When I hear these niggas talk about Philly, I'm not I don't hear it like, oh, like
Yeah.
these are like they must be speaking slang like that dudes from Philly know, or talking about locations that dudes from Philly know.
Okay.
It just sounds like they just pay lip service to like, we're from Philly, and then they like go, it's like, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't
I
know.
got you. No,
Yeah.
you know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm being even too generous. But I do feel though, I do feel that at least on Philadelphia Half-Life,
Yeah,
they speak
yeah.
much more about Philadelphia, and then on Do You Want More, it's much more just about the roots.
About them, yeah.
Whereas on here, it's not really much about anything. Like it's here like little bits and pieces, but it's not really much about anything, and it can make it difficult to connect with the album. But there's so many other things about it that I do
Uh-oh.
enjoy that I still just enjoy this album. But I have more lowlights though.
Yeah, yeah, go for
So one of my other lowlights is Common, and
it.
yo,
I agree.
Common is like he's like a pervert. You know what I mean? Like his verse on here, like on one hand, I respect his verse on
Uh-huh.
Act Two. I respect it because there are like a lot of like hip hop references in the verse itself. Like, so I get that.
Yeah.
But like he also like the way that he equates hip hop to a woman, and then the things he's talking about that are done to the woman. It's almost like he gets off on seeing like women abused and like I don't know. It's just weird. It's
Yeah.
weird, bro. Like when I was younger, I didn't notice these things, right? Because I'm not thinking about the world like as a mature adult. And then like
Yeah.
go back and I hear this verse and I hear other common verses, and it's like,
Yeah.
yo, like low key, I think you have a problem. Like it's weird. So common is the low light for me on here.
I agree with you. I felt like though maybe it was just like, you know how this happens to me at work a lot, right? Like
Yeah.
someone will create like a parallel or like a metaphor or something, and then people will
Mhm.
keep trying to extend the metaphor, and they'll run out of
Yeah.
things to say, and then it just becomes laughable, right? Like it's
Yeah.
like okay, like you're just saying anything to like keep the metaphor going, right?
Yeah.
Like I almost felt that way. Like I felt like, okay, we got I used to love her, cool. And then it's like there's other songs that like Common's like been asked to extend the metaphor of like I used to love her, and he's running out of things to say, and so he's just fucking saying anything. And it's just like,
Yeah.
ugh. Like I don't know why this song was created. And I was gonna wait till he went track for track, but like this song is so fucking annoying and corny to me. But anyway.
Wow. Okay, that might be a salute me or shoot me, but we'll get to that
Yeah.
on the when we get to track for track
I mean, we
analysis.
already know what Panama thinks of the record, so you
Yeah.
know, clearly
Yeah.
I might be in the minority there, but
My last low light is the low key erasure of Malik B. And
okay,
it's not that he's not featured on this album. He's actually featured on this album quite heavily.
right.
My problem though is that if you talk about notable songs on this album,
Mhm.
the only one is he on Dundee? I think he might
Yeah,
be on 100%
Malik B,
Dundee.
100%
Alright.
Dundee. Yeah, he's on there. He's on
Yeah,
like
he which I
a few joints.
he rips Dundee, right?
Yes.
And he is on Adrenaline, but he's not the highlight of Adrenaline.
Yeah.
So when you think about songs like The Next Movement or Dynamite or Double Trouble or was it Act Two or what's the other one? The other one that Dice Raw is on.
Step into the room.
No, not Step Into the Realm. Ain't Saying Nothing New, right? Like when you think about like some notable songs on here, Malik B just like isn't featured. And it's just like you kind of have to get into the album and appreciate Malik B to get a sense of him. But it's like there's some songs like Dynamite has he has a dude who's Dynamite.
Dice? Dice
What
room?
is it? Rahani Saeed, right?
Oh,
And I'm
okay.
sure Rahani Saeed is a cool individual. I'm sure he's got a great relationship to the Roots. I'm sure he deserves to be featured on this album. But like, why is he on that song? Why isn't Malik B on that song. Like it's catered perfectly to his voice and to his flow.
Yeah.
And to have a back and forth with Black Thought. And it's just like at the time, I didn't really think about it. But then, learning more about the roots and learning more about Malik B, rest in peace, and all, all the troubles that he had to deal with, the fact he couldn't go on the road and all the other things, personal things going on in his life, which we don't necessarily have to discuss. It's just kind of like, damn, like I feel like he should have been a bigger part on the better songs on this album, and he's not, and it's just disappointing.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair. I know, outside of everything that occurred, even throughout this album, they talked a lot about how, like, his substance abuse issues impacted how much he could appear and things like that. So that might also have something to do with it.
Yeah. So now let's get into the highlights, and what do you got for us, Yinka?
Word. I got multiple highlights. So after I completely bashed Black Thought as a main character, I'll say Black Thought. Like, he so all right. Again, this is like a group that, and I've seen the Roots live. They're amazing, right? And as a frontman of a hip hop band, Black Thought is everything that you want and more as that.
Yeah.
And so, when I listen to this in that context, Black Thought is great. And, I love him more live, but, even in this context, Black Thought is great.
Did you see the Roots when they came to Charlottesville when we were in school?
Yes.
Do you remember when he spent like the first half of that show rapping to the band and had his back to the audience?
Yep.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That was crazy. I was like, Black Thought, why are you being a dickhead? But it's also like, I love you. I guess you could do whatever you want. But like, why are you being a dickhead?
Yeah. No, he's just so fantastic at that. I remember another thing I remember, because that same year that, I did the Ludacris and Freeway show where I helped set up and then I watched it. And then I did the same thing with the Roots. So I was at that show as well. But later that year, or maybe the next year, I went and saw them in Cali. I was back home for like the holiday or something like that. And it might have been maybe around my fourth year or something. But I remember This Is Why I'm Hot was the biggest song on the radio and everywhere.
Mims.
So, and the Mims song. And at some point, the band is playing songs that are hot on the radio, like the beats to songs that are hot on the radio. And Black Thought is just fucking punishing all of them. He's just the beat just switches up, and then he's on the mic and he's just killing it. And I remember This Is Why I'm Hot comes on, and you can just see, the beginning of the song just reverberating, doom, 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 doom. And you can see the whole crowd just kind of looking around, because it's like, the Roots are an underground group, so they're kind of like, what's about to happen? And then when Black Thought starts rapping, the whole crowd just goes crazy ballistic. So Black Thought, man, like, I can't understate enough how good he is at this, which is, if what you want is like, because back in the days, I would do shows with the Beatniks and with some of these other groups that were created in the image, really, of like the Roots, right? And do these live shows where you have a band, or you have, a DJ, and you have, an MC that's just keeping the crowd going and interacting with folks and really being what the definition of an MC is, right? Like shepherding along this program. And as orator, Black Thought is excellent.
Yeah.
So cool. That's my first one. My second highlight is production. I think overall this production is great. And I think maybe even a bit to the detriment of the program, because I feel like on many occasions listening to this album, I would have preferred to hear D'Angelo over what I was hearing, or Bilal over what I was hearing, than Whack MCs, we're from Philly.
This album was recorded in Electric Ladyland Studios, by the way.
Yep, at the same time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Like I'm hearing these, and I'm thinking like Water for Chocolate, and I'm thinking Voodoo, and I'm going, man, sometimes I wish that this production was placed somewhere different.
Gotcha.
But production as a highlight for sure. My next highlight is Scott Storch.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
I think
sir.
Scott Storch really did his thing. And I think the records that he's on, like, elevated, you know.
Mhm.
Even You Got Me, you know, for what it
Yeah.
is. Like, he really stuck his foot in there.
Yeah, for sure.
Next is Jay Dilla.
Oh, yes.
Man,
Absolutely, yeah.
Dynamite is
Yeah.
it's so good. It's
Yeah.
so good. And like, and I think, you know, in terms of, and I was gonna get to this later, but in terms of how the album is paced and sequenced, the fact that you can stick a Jay Dilla production or a couple of Jay Dilla productions in the body of your album and it still flows, you know,
Mhm.
because for some folks, these Jay Dilla productions stand out like sore thumbs because they're so nice and rich and complex, but it just flows perfectly. So Dilla, I got Rozelle as
Oh, okay.
as a highlight. I think in this time frame, I was a lot more impressed by beatboxing than I am now.
Yeah.
But I feel like I really appreciated beats with beatboxing incorporated in them. Timbaland did it at times, and I really liked, you know, Rozelle on Dundee and the, you know, the joints that he
Yeah.
performed
Yeah.
on. Okay, I got like two more.
Go ahead.
Features. I think the
Mhm.
features brought it. They sounded like they belonged there. And specifically the ones that were oriented around Philly, I think
Absolutely.
did help to
100%.
create that world that I'm saying we lacked. And so I
Mhm.
respect that. That Siegel, Eve, you know,
Mhm.
Jill Scott on the original version, you know.
Yeah.
So, but Mos Def brought it. Badu brought it. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? So everybody was
Absolutely.
good. Song structure or lack
Mhm.
thereof. I think the fact that they switched it up and there were certain places where, you know, like they had like three verses, and then there were other joints that kind of was like just a verse and then instrumentation and it rides out and stuff like that, kept it interesting.
Okay.
The mixes, you know,
Okay.
decidedly earthy and analog feeling. I could hear Russell Elevado all over these mixes. Like, you know,
Mm.
like that Electric Ladyland, that you know, that Like Water for Chocolate and Voodoo. Like I heard the mixes contextualized in the same way. And then my last highlight, and it's probably leads into the track for track, so I won't put extras on it, but I feel like the intro is great.
Oh, yeah, it absolutely is.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
those are my highlights. What I miss.
So we have a lot of the similar highlights. I said that you know, the key contributors, Scott Storch, D'Angelo was a key contributor on several of these songs, as well as James Poyser. We have to shout out James Poyser.
Oh yeah,
He
yeah,
was,
for sure.
yeah, absolutely.
He's so good.
The features, like you mentioned, Badu, Eve, Mos Def, Siegel. And you know, I like Dice Raw. I like Dice Raw with the Roots, so I thought he was good here, and as well as Jill Scott. The introduction to Jill Scott as a writer, as a
Mhm.
songwriter, was really powerful as well.
That's true.
I also agree with you. Black Thought to me is a highlight. The production is a highlight as well. The things that the big, I think the difference is that you said you did buy this album, right?
Yeah, I did.
So which album cover do you have?
Ooh.
Do you remember?
I don't. The one that I always see whenever I Google this album. Hold on.
Is the girl?
Let me go on.
The girl being
Yeah,
chased by
the girl
two
being
cops in
chased.
Brooklyn?
Yeah, yeah.
So
That's
for
the one.
me, one of the biggest highlights of this album, and also kind of like a disappointment, but it's the biggest highlight, is the packaging of this album. The packaging of this album is one of like the greatest hip hop packagings of an album of all time, right?
Okay.
Like the fact that it's called Things Fall Apart. Um, and then, you know, the CD itself is like very plain looking. It almost looks like some like
Right.
generic thing, but it highlights the OK player. And then you have all these different covers. And so like there's 5 covers. Like the one I have is the one of like the starving child in Somalia in 1990, right? But then you have the most famous one is the one that you often see online, where it's the woman being chased by 2 cops in Brooklyn, which
Right.
apparently like that photo has actually kind of been lost. Like if not for this album, that would be a lost photo. Like no one knows who took it or something. That may be mistaken, but yeah, it's weird. There's another one. There's a bombed church. There's an abandoned baby in Shanghai South railway station in 1937.
Okay.
And then the most interesting one, which you're not likely to see, is like there's a mob boss who's been mutilated, and he's like I guess he's like dead or whatever, but he's holding like the ace of spades or something like that, like from a
Okay.
poker game.
Okay.
That one you're not going to see too often. But
Okay.
I think that when you combine like the packaging with the name of the album and the fact that like the band is called The Roots, like I'm expecting all of that in this album, and I'm not getting very much of any of that, which is like one of the biggest disappointments.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Completely agree.
Nevertheless, though, the packaging of this album
It
is
is
still
great.
And
Yeah.
the liner notes.
Yeah.
The liner notes. Have you ever gone through and read the liner notes?
I probably did back then, but again, I didn't love this album, so I probably didn't care that much, to be honest with you.
Amir is dropping some nuggets, a lot of like nuggets in the liner notes. So, yeah.
I think that on Questlove's podcast, because he talks about this album and the making of it all the time, one of the things that he was saying though was that like he felt really snubbed by the rollout of the album, because he feels the way you feel about the covers, right? Like I guess they put like a lot of intention into the covers, and apparently each of the covers was a different release. So I guess the thought was like one of the covers was supposed to be for the edited version, and another cover was supposed to be for the international version, and another so. But then like the label didn't roll it out exactly as they had planned. So like I think their expectation was that like that the cover thing was gonna like resonate more because of how they strategized it, but then it wasn't executed how they wanted it.
Got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is cool. I don't know that I've seen all the other covers, but I think that is a really, really cool concept.
Yeah. I mean, I remember I had the choice, and I went with, I don't know why I went with the Hungry Child. If I had to do it over again, for without a doubt, I would try to find the one with the mob boss and the Ace of Spades card.
Because it's rare.
Because it's like a really, well, yeah, it's rare. It's also like just so different. Yeah, so I guess it's a little gruesome, but they're all gruesome. I mean, like, seeing a photo of a starving kid crying, like that's gruesome.
Right.
So,
yep.
All right, so let's get into the track for track analysis.
Yeah,
right?
let's do it.
All right, so Act 1, Things Fall Apart. This is one of my favorite intros of all time.
Yeah, I love it. I think this and Rising Down are my favorite Roots intros. But man, this is so good. And honestly, it's so good that it might explain my disdain for the album. Because it so well encapsulates everything that I want the Roots to tell me, that when it isn't fleshed out in the body of the album, it makes me feel very underwhelmed.
Yeah. It's crazy because I first of all, to unpack this a little bit, it's taken from the conversation, the argument, from Mo Better Blues, right?
Yep.
Between Bleak Gillum, who is Denzel's character, and Shadow Henderson, who's Wesley Snipes' character, right? And Bleak is coming from the point of like, well, we go out to these shows and we see everybody except our people. This is our music. And Wesley Snipes is like, well, that's bullshit. If you play the things that they like, the people will come. Simple as that, right? And it's just like, it's one of those things where it's actually hard to be on either one of their sides, because they're both kind of right and both kind of wrong. I guess like it's like the problem, like that is the problem.
Yep.
Right. But like one way is not the right, like stepping left or stepping right is not going to solve the problem.
Yep.
But it's interesting to hear them talk about it from their perspective, because the Roots, at least at that time, were notorious travelers, right? Like they toured a lot. That's how they made their bread.
Right.
And this is what they would see. And like they go to all these places and it's just like, where are our people? And then when you talk about all the different types of music, that this is like blues, rock, like jazz, like where are all the black people? Like why is it that we create something and it's great and then everybody else loves it and then we have to go on to something else, right? And the same thing is going to happen to hip hop, and it has happened to hip hop.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think, that to expound on that, I feel like, because Questlove talks about this a lot, and apparently they had a manager who passed away, but apparently he was having this conversation with them all the time. And so he heard that and was like, oh my God, this is the fight that we're having, right? Because it was like, Quest and the band wanted to be these super esoteric, we're out there hippity hoppity guys. And their manager is like, at the end of the day, cool, you guys are really smart and heady and all that other shit, but like, we need to make some money at this. So
Mm-hmm.
like, just fucking play what people want to hear, right?
Right.
And they talk a lot about, I don't know if you know this, but like during the period of from organics maybe to like Philadelphia Half-Life, like that time frame, they end up like moving, maybe just before Philadelphia Half-Life, they ended up moving to the UK because they couldn't book any shows in the States, and they weren't really making a lot of money at music, right? And so the only place they were really able to book shows was in Europe. So
Okay.
so their manager basically moves them to the UK, and they get this apartment above a fish and chips shop in the UK. And so they're there, but they're living as like starving artists. And so I think this conversation is like them essentially trying to conceptualize how the roots are, like what their path forward is. Because as you're saying, they go to Europe and people love what they're doing in Europe, but then their people, the Black American hip hop people that they want to be connected with, aren't
Mm-hmm.
appreciating what they're doing at
Yeah.
all. And so it's like, do we lean into this super gangsta, thug thing that's popping over there, or where do we find who we are and what our identity is? So I think this
Yeah.
this intro is amazing. It's perfect for that.
The other thing too is I love at the end the little snippet that they have where I still feel this today, and I've even mentioned this on the podcast where like
Mhm.
sometimes hip hop isn't viewed as art and
Yeah,
it's just kind of viewed as disposable.
disposable art.
And it's crazy because I definitely feel that way now due to just the volume
Yeah,
of music from the same artist who often sound like each other,
right.
right? So you have a lot of the people who sound the same who give us a lot of music frequently.
Yep.
For with me, I personally just think that that dilutes the airwaves and it makes your art disposable.
Right.
But then to hear that back in the '90s, when I don't necessarily consider hip hop from the '90s as disposable, but that was something that was happening. That was a conversation, at least it was happening then.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So, but then we get into like one of my favorite tracks ever, and
Really.
yeah, I think this is my highlight of highlights, and that is the table of contents, part one and part two. I enjoy part two, but particularly part one is like, wow, what an intro into the roots, into and into Black Thought. And you have to understand, with the exception of like I Shall Proceed, because that was a hit, I wasn't really familiar with the roots. So really, this is like the first time I'm ever, oh, You Got Me was a hit on the radio. So
Hmm.
okay.
Hmm.
I remember You Got Me, right? And that song actually is not what drew me to the album. My brother played it for me. And so this is like really kind of like my intro to the roots. And I was like, oh my God, this
Okay.
song is amazing. This beat is amazing. The energy is amazing. Black Thought, I didn't know you could rap like this. What is going on? It's nuts.
Got you.
Yeah.
I don't think that
Yeah.
this song was such a big thing to me, honestly.
Got you.
It just sounds like a guy freestyling.
Yo, but he rips it to me
yeah.
though. Even though he like again, he not talking about anything, but it was just like the flow and like the timing of his raps and just
Yeah.
the other interesting thing too though is that I was reading the liner notes and I heard like where they got the song idea from. It's by this
Okay.
group called I think it's called The Alliance, and the song is called Kibbles and Bits. And of course, back in the day, I could never find this song. Now, because the internet is more mature and we have things like YouTube, I've heard this song. And like the original song, the way that they took that original song and then repurposed it to make the version that they did is really, really cool.
That's dope.
So
I also
yeah.
read somewhere that there were actually supposed to be four parts of the song
Oh, really?
rather than parts one and two, and that I like the remaining two parts were produced by Dilla.
Mm,
But then they truncated it, and that supposedly they're gonna put out some future project where they feature the remaining two parts. So that should be interesting as well. Yeah.
interesting. I also like Malik B's part. I didn't initially when I was younger, but that beat is kind of dope. I don't think that Malik is the best on that beat, but that beat for part two is really, I don't know. I'm not sure if it should follow part one, but nevertheless, that beat is sick.
Yeah.
So anyway, so now we get into the next movement, and this is definitely a highlight for me.
Yeah, definitely a highlight for me. This back in the day, this probably would have been my highlight of highlights. I don't know. It might even still be my highlight of house, just because it's just such a good song, and it's an easy song to engage with, right? Like you don't have to be like into hip hop or into anything specific to appreciate and enjoy it.
Yeah. This is one where we have Jazzy Jeff is featured on it. He's the one doing the scratches.
Yep.
Which was interesting because the Roots, they weren't really supposed to do scratches. That's why they had Scratch, so he could do the audio scratch.
Really?
But it was something like that's the reason why they got Scratch.
Yeah.
So that he could do like he could mimic the turntable without them actually having to have a turntable.
But Jeff is Philly, and he's legendary Philly.
True.
So I it made sense to me at least.
Yeah, I remember there was a video for this, which was pretty cool. And it actually, one of Thought's verses got featured as like when BET used to do their like lyric of the week.
Okay.
One of his verses got featured as the lyric of the week. This is one of those where like Black Thought he's actually saying a lot, but not really. Like it just does, like he's got a lot of bars on here, but again, it's just
he's saying a lot of words.
Yeah.
But I thought that this video was really creative. I remember it, the video, if I remember correctly, right, is the one where like they're playing and they open up the curtains, and then you see the band playing, and then they close the curtains, and then they open them again, and then they're upside down, and then they close them again, and then they're sideways. Like, so I mean, it was just unique, and it was a good way to show like, hey, we're a band, right? Because that was a unique and novel thing in hip hop at the time.
It definitely was.
So it was dope.
All right. So now we get into Step Into the Realm. Highlight, low light.
Blah. It's fine. It's another what the fuck are you talking about? But I think if I remember correctly, Malik B does kind of rip it a little bit. I think he rips the next song more, but he has the back to the topic of the rap philosopher, something like that. But I mean, it's fine to me. Well, I don't know. What'd you think?
I was kind of neutral about it. This one sounds like it has a subject matter, and it kind of does, but not really. It's weird. Like, I don't know. I just feel I'm not this is not a low light for me, but I'm not the biggest fan of this song. Like this stretch of songs, the Step Into the Realm and the Spark. This is kind of like a low light for me in general. So
I think this reminds me, this hook reminds me of something that me and my crew would have made in like 9th or 10th grade. Like where it's like, step into the realm, you're bound to get caught. From this worldly life, you'll soon depart. And then it comes on, yo, I shoot the gift like, you know what I mean? It's like, all right, bro, cool. That's fine.
I think I would have, you talk about this album being too long. This is one of the songs I think, you probably could have trimmed from it. So what do you feel about, or how do you feel about the Spark?
So I think that this hook is the corniest, wackest shit ever. It reminds me of every reason why like I used to hate like certain open mics. The feet that I walk with, the hair that I spit with, that like, bro,
eyes
what the fuck are you talking about? But Malik B fucking murders this song. And that's the one thing that I took away from this is like, oh shit, Malik B can rap a little bit. So those are my thoughts. How about you?
It's interesting because I want to say it's like a low light, and I think the collection of Step Into the Realm with the Spark together is a low light in the album for me. But I agree essentially with what you're saying. I think that Malik B, the verses on this are good, but his hook is kind of whack. That being said, though, there's some interesting things that they do with the beats that I kind of have respect for. But again, this isn't really doing it for me.
Yeah, I think Malik B really, really ripped it. And that was my takeaway, right? He says, I didn't make highs yet, but that's my next project. I thought that was like a really high bar. And Malik B didn't have many verses, in my opinion. We didn't have many verses, period, but he didn't have much that impressed me, but I was impressed by him on this. And I felt like it woke me up because I was listening to it and I was really annoyed. I was annoyed with the feet that I walk with, the phlegm that I spit with, or whatever. Like, I'm like, oh my God, this is why I don't want to listen to this album. And then, Malik B's verse comes on, and he's like, "It's Abu Malik." Oh, I was like, "Oh snap, he can rap!" Like he was going off. So.
The problem is that Black Thought is not on the song at all, and I think that if you wanted to have a song that Malik B was the feature on it, like he's the main performer, then at least let Black Thought do the hook.
Yeah.
And to have it breaking up, because if a song just of Malik B with this kind of beat and with this kind of hook is like, it's gonna be a struggle.
Yeah, I think it's the hook, man. Because to be honest with you, I would have loved to have like a Malik B like solo record where he tells us a bit about himself. Like he seems like he was an interesting cat. He had his own struggles. He had his own things that were going on in his life, and it would have been great to hear about that. To me personally,
Gotcha. So now we get into Dynamite featuring Rahani Saeed. And this is, I guess, my next favorite song on the album.
Yeah. This might be our highlight of highlights at this point. Because this
I think that's fair.
Because this Dilla beat is fucking incredible, bro. Like, I'm listening to this shit and I'm just like, oh my God, this is so good.
Have you heard the original song that he samples?
I don't think so. What is it?
So it's from a band called Nirvana, but not the one with Kurt Cobain, right? This is the one from like the 60s. It was like a jazz band.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And the song is called Indiana. And like, so he samples it and he puts his crazy drums on it, right? And when you read through the liner notes, it's quite fascinating. I think that this is one of, is it this one where Questlove said like these were like the proudest moments of the drums? No, that was a different one.
Okay.
All right, there's a different one. But nevertheless, though, Jay Dilla tried to make his drums in a way that like he didn't feel could be reproduced by like a live drummer, and Questlove figured out how to do it. So like as he like as they actually like performed the beat live, like he was kind of like bragging to Jay Dilla a little bit, you know what I mean? Like just kind of like roasting each other a little bit. But this beat and this back and forth, I really wish it was Malik B on here, because I think this would have been like one of the highlights for Malik. I think he would have killed it, but nevertheless, man, I still play the song at parties, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because like it's like one of those unexpected songs, and it's just got like such like this groove and this bounce to it.
Yeah,
it's really good.
Yeah, it's like a modern James Brown song. Like it's fire.
Oh yeah. So now we get into Without a Doubt featuring Lady B. Highlight, low light, neutral.
I said this is the freestyle lunch table cipher record, and that's fine.
Yeah. I'm not the biggest fan of this song, but I do still listen to it. One, because it's in a run. So like, you know, the opening intro through the next movement, like obviously I think that's a great like start to the album. Step Into the Realm, The Spark, that's kind of like when I go to sleep or just skip. But then we go into Dynamite. And then like we have like a good length of songs, right? And so Without a Doubt, like I don't necessarily need to skip it, but it's cool because they repurpose Schoolie D's Saturday Night. Have you ever seen the movie The King of New York?
No.
So King of New York stars Christopher Walken as Frank White, right? So obviously that's where Big gets his Frank White moniker from. But there's a song that's heavily featured. It's called Schoolie D's Saturday Night, and it's the same beat. Schoolie D is from Philly, I think. But because of that, like, I don't know. I just think that aspect of it is kind of cool.
Got you. So it's a callback to Philly history.
Yeah.
That's dope.
So that aspect of the song is cool. So now we get into Ain't Saying Nothing New, which is a highlight for me, but I get the feeling it's not one for you.
I just think this song is funny because it's like, you have a song about how other people aren't saying anything new, and you're also not saying anything new.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And the other thing that I wrote down here is represent the legendary Fifth Dynasty crew. And that particular quote annoyed me. And the reason it annoyed me is because, you know, it's like, we've never heard of the Fifth Dynasty crew, and maybe they are legendary, but why are they legendary? Where are they legendary? How are they legendary? Like, why do I care about them? And I feel like, you know, I just feel like the Roots did a lot of that, just like kind of throwing things out there that I didn't really feel like they qualified, and Ain't Saying Nothing New felt that way.
But isn't the Fifth Dynasty crew, isn't that the Roots?
Okay, maybe I don't know. And
Oh, I always thought it was the Roots because they were like they always called like
they
Illa Fifth represent. So they're representing like the Fifth Ward of Philly or whatever, right?
okay, is that what it is? See,
I always thought
went
that's what it was.
went over my it might be because
Oh,
I
I
they
got you.
always would say like Illa Fifth, Ill Fifth,
Yeah.
Fifth Dynamite.
Justice, Illa Fifth,
But
Dynamite. Yeah.
like okay, so they're legendary. Again, why are they legendary? How are they legendary? I it just felt like a lot of empty platitudes to me.
Got you.
But I
That's
don't know.
fair.
The beat was cool though. So what'd you think of it?
Exactly. That's one of the reasons why it's so one of my highlights is because I think the beat is so cool.
Yeah.
And especially like the way the song comes together. I think they were essentially like doing an interview and someone asked like, well, how do you put a song together? It's like, all right, well, this is what we do. And then they liked it and it just kind of became a song. Dice Raw happened to be there, so cool, and he was on it. So yeah, but
And then they just said
yeah,
something for the hook, or
I guess that's what it was. Yeah, y'all ain't saying nothing new. So, but again, like it was a missed opportunity because that beat is so cool, and the
yeah,
concept of ain't saying nothing new is really cool. But then they don't really touch on that, so it's
exactly.
unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now we get into Double Trouble featuring Mos Def, and this is absolutely a highlight for me. Yes, for you.
Absolutely. Fuck yeah.
So again, they're not talking, they're not saying a goddamn thing. I don't care.
I don't care
The
either.
back and forth between Mos Def and Black Thought is amazing,
Right.
and they sound so good on
Yes.
this record.
Yes.
Like Mos Def, like hearing this, I remember. I was in the car, like it was like a couple years ago, and it actually had been maybe like 5 years since I had heard this album, which is too long because I usually listen to this album like, like at least like once every other year or so.
Right.
And it's just been a while since I heard this song, and like it comes on, I just had like a smile on my face the whole time. Like
Yeah.
Mos Def's like just bubbly energy on here is just so great. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree. This is like, what was that NBA All-Star game where you had like Kobe was clearly trying to get MVP, but then there was someone on the other team. I don't remember if it was like AI or somebody else that's amazing as well. And so they're just going back and forth and back and forth.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that you're witnessing history while you're watching them, and they look like they're having a blast. They're going at each other, but in a friendly competition type of a way.
Yeah.
And that's what this track is. Like, it's actually probably my highlight of highlights. Actually, I've said that already like twice, but I really, really like this joint.
I mean, the energy of it reminds me of jam sessions that I used to have with Cal Mont, our friend Carlos, right? Because Carlos actually, when you hear him rap, he's kind of like, I'm not saying like lyrically, but like flow wise and voice, he's kind of like a combination of like Mos Def and Q-Tip. So he just kind of has that energy. But one of the other things too is that I think Talib Kweli was originally supposed to have vocals on here, and they just cut him because it was too long, and that was a very good choice. That was a very good choice.
I think though that I read that actually that like Talib actually ripped it, and I think the reason they removed it was that maybe the song was too long, and at the time Talib was an unknown artist. Yeah. I think they were like, like most, like we know you want to put your man on or whatever, but I think that's what they said, something like that.
Well, look, they can say he ripped it all you want to, but it's like one of those things like, what's that expression? If a tree falls down in the forest and no one's there, does it make a sound? Like that's what that is.
Yeah,
I'll believe it when I actually hear it. That Talib probably ripped it. But this is the beat where I think this is Quest's proudest moments on the album with the drums. I forgot why, but this is like he just loves the drums that he did on here.
That's what's up.
And the other thing too is I just have to say that like James Poyser, I think this is like one of his beats.
Yeah.
And like he's just absolutely killing it with this.
Yeah, he marks it for sure.
So now we get into Act 2, The Love of My Life featuring Common, and I take it this is the low light for you.
It's not a low light. It's just blah. Okay. Like, I feel like it's a corny concept that we've heard before with I Used to Love Her. And it's like, for me personally, I like Common. So especially in this time frame. And so it's like, it just feels like a wasted Common verse. Like, I feel like, don't make Common do I Used to Love Her part 17. Just give him a verse on a song that I actually care about. That's how I felt.
That's probably true.
Beat was good though.
Yeah, and we already talked about how I feel like I don't know, Common was just into this whole idea of like women being exploited. I'm gonna, tangentially relate that to hip hop.
Yeah.
But for me though, this is still a highlight. James Poyser is heavily involved. I like how the song came together. It was supposed to just be an interlude, but they loved the beat so much. And like the background vocals, like that woman making that sound, you know who that is, right?
No.
So that's a Marie. I can never say her name correctly. It's like Marie Dolnay. Are you familiar with Zap Mama?
Yeah.
Yeah. That like the main person responsible for Zap Mama, who is incredible. If you ever seen her in concert, she's absolutely amazing. All like the different random things that she does, she is incredible. Like in a year where I saw Femi Kuti and Raphael Sadiq twice, Zap Mama and like the Black Cat with like not very many people in the audience was like the best show I'd ever seen that year.
Wow.
Like it was amazing.
Wow.
She's crazy, but she's the one who's putting like those background vocals for the song together. And I think that with like the string arrangements, like a good string arrangement, I think like the sound bed of this song is really, really cool.
Yeah.
Do they rip it? I don't know. Conceptually, I like it. I don't think that I Used to Love Her has to be the only song that could do that. You know what I mean? But I don't know. I feel like if Common had a better verse on here, I would love it even more. But I like the song a lot. So you're not gonna catch any. I'm not gonna catch any shots from Panama for dissing this track.
I think the whole concept of like hip hop, you the love of my life. Like, shut the fuck up, nigga. Get a girlfriend.
Wow.
Like, I don't know. This shit doesn't work for me.
That's tough.
That's just
tough.
me. Yeah.
All right. Well, now we get into 100% Dundee, and this is a highlight for me.
Yeah, it's a highlight.
I think that this is probably Malik B. He is good on the Spark, but again, the hook is bad. But like on this, it's just like he's just on the like I don't know. I feel like he rips it. Rozelle rips it, doing the bass and the drums at the same time. I think that like Black Thought sounds really good on here as well. And yeah, this is just a dope song.
Yeah,
So-
I think I was a lot more excited about Rozelle beatboxing on the track back in the day, but I think I was probably just more excited about beatboxing back in the day. But this is definitely one of the better songs. And these are some of Black Thought's best bars, in my opinion. I liked the I bayonet cassettes and chop beats with that part of his joint. Yeah, so I thought they both ripped it. This is one of the better songs.
Okay. Deidre versus Dice Raw. It's an interlude, but it's still a highlight for me. What do you think? No?
I don't even remember this. What was this?
This is when it's Deidre, she's the cellist. So she's just playing the cello and like Dice Raw is just like kind of freestyling, whatever.
Oh, okay.
Essentially, this was like a really, really long jam session, and then they just cut the snippet and put it on the album. I have a soft spot for the cello.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, I just think it's a really, really cool instrument. And so the fact that you have an instrument that can do those low notes, but then do those high notes both very, very well and effectively, I just have a soft spot for it. So it's still a highlight for me. It's a really quick interlude, is what it is. So now we get into Adrenaline. And is this a highlight for you?
It is. This was one of my favorite songs even back then. It's the early Siegel verse. I love Siegel. I've always loved Siegel. And I love I used to cop off my man. Now I'm supplying him some Iverson. Like he just I love how he extended that. He just kept doing that. But yeah. I love this joint. How about you?
Yeah. I'm trying to think if I'm definitely not neutral about it. I'm favorable about it. It's not one of my like highest highlights, but it is generally a highlight for me. I love Beanie Siegel on here. Dice Raw. I think it has too many verses. Like I'm not sure if I need Dice Raw on here.
Yeah, that's fair.
And is Malik B on here as well?
Maybe. I don't know. There's 4 verses, right?
Yeah, so I think Malik is on
3
here.
verses?
I'm not sure if I need too many folks. But Scott Storch is doing the keys on here, which is great. You got Scratch doing the scratches. And I think that one of the things I love about having Beanie on here is that when Questlove talks about him, yes, he has gone to Rockefeller at this point, but it's not clear that Beanie Siegel will become like Beanie Siegel.
Right, exactly.
And so to hear like so many names, like Jill Scott's being mentioned, Eve is being mentioned, Beanie Siegel's being mentioned, and Questlove doesn't know that they're going to be like stars.
Right.
It's really kind of cool.
I love that about Questlove's story.
Yeah.
he's almost like the nucleus of this Philly world, and how he like these folks kind of come in and come out of his story and create their own stories, and I think that's amazing.
Yeah. So then we have third acts, which is Scratch versus Quest,
Quest.
I guess. Are you familiar
Yeah.
with this one?
Yeah, so I think at the time I thought it was Rozelle.
I
Um,
wished it was Rozelle because I think Rozzelle's a better scratcher than Scratch, in my
yeah,
opinion.
but
But
it was just fine. Yeah,
yeah, it's fine. I kind of feel the same.
yeah,
So now we get into You Got Me featuring Erica Badu and Eve. And a shout out to Jill Scott because she wrote the hook.
yeah.
But is this a highlight for you?
It's a highlight. There's not too much to say that hasn't been said already because I feel like they've done a
I
whole
agree.
podcast about this. But the
Yeah.
only thing is I low key kind of wish the Jill Scott version was on here. But that's all.
I feel that. I do like that they both performed at Dave Chappelle's Block Party.
Yeah,
That's
true.
really cool to me. I think that Jill Scott's hook writing is a highlight for me. I think, the keys from Scott Storch are a highlight.
Mhm.
Introducing Eve. If she's not
Yes.
introduced here, is this her first verse?
It's not her first verse, but like at the time she had gotten a deal with Dr. Dre and it fizzles out. She comes back home to Philly and they're trying to figure out what they're gonna do with her career. But she's not
Yeah.
Eve yet.
No,
She
she's not
hasn't
Eve
even
yet,
done
no.
the Rough Riders thing yet, I don't
Yeah.
think. So she was like a
Yeah.
fairly unknown artist at the time.
Yeah. Her appearance on here is crazy. I think Badu's appearance on here is crazy.
Yeah.
Funny thing is, Black Thought is actually like the worst part about this song.
You think so?
He's just all the other. He's not bad. He's just
Yeah.
like every other aspect of the song. I think is great.
Yeah.
The
I think
video of
he's
the song
fine.
is really cool too. Do you remember the video for this?
What happened?
So the video for it doesn't really have much to do about the song, but it's still really, really cool. So Black Thought is like walking through the streets, and everybody on the ground is like everybody else around, like they're just on the ground, like laying there.
Okay.
Right? And he's walking along and he's seeing all these people, and he sees this girl is on the ground. And so he goes and then like he goes to spoon her, like he goes to cuddle her,
Mhm.
and then it flashes. And then everybody else is like alive and awake, and she's on the ground like screaming because her man has just been shot, and he's the one who got shot. You don't remember this video?
Nah, that sounds crazy.
Oh, it was really cool. Yeah, it was really, really
That
cool.
sounds crazy.
And the other thing too is I love at the end when like it gets into this like drum and bass.
Yeah.
So that's really, really, really cool.
Yeah, Quest talked about how when they lived above the fish and chip shop in the UK, they got really into drum and bass because that was kind of the music that was popular over there at the time, and he wanted to find a way to incorporate it into what they were doing. And he talked about how like everybody told him not to do that, and so like he damn near had to sneak that part on the album because like the label like wanted it off. They thought he was crazy, and he was like, no, like we're gonna do this. So I think that's a dope and bold move on his part.
Got you. So now we get into Don't See Us featuring Dice Raw. How do you feel about this?
I could have done without the song. It's fine.
I feel like that's fair,
Yeah.
but it's a highlight for me
Okay.
because we used to do this, right? Like I had friends who were like musicians, and like occasionally I was able to go and just like jam with them.
Mhm.
We just put a beat together and then we just start freestyling
Mm-hmm.
or just start rapping. Carlos was involved a couple times. A couple times I even got on the bass and they're like, yo, just play like a couple of like notes and just like jam. Like you got rhythm.
Mhm.
You don't have to do much. And it just kind of gave me that vibe. Like it reminds me of that.
Yeah.
So it's not a great song, but it's just a personal highlight for me just because
Gotcha.
I love the energy from it.
Got you.
So James Poyser is on here again.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Then we have a Return to Innocence Lost featuring Ursula Rucker.
Mhm.
How do you feel about this?
Mixed. I feel
Okay,
like
go ahead.
in the same way that I felt about the intro, I felt that the outro was once again this deep story that was way deeper than anything that happened in the body of the album.
Mm-hmm.
And that was disappointing to me. So it was
I hear you.
cool. It was nice. I also don't know that I understood the tie of Ursula Rucker to the group. Like why would she work with them?
I forget. Is she from Philly?
I don't know. That's why I guess what I'm kind of asking.
I think she is. They have a long history. So for their first like 4 albums, maybe even I'm not sure if she's on Phrenology,
Okay.
but like for their first 4 projects, she was always contributing to the outro of the album with the poem.
Got it. Okay.
Right. So this is not the first time she's done
Got
this.
it.
It's the
Okay.
4th time she's done this.
Okay.
This is a song that was uncomfortable for me to hear back in the day. So I
Yeah.
used to like kind of skip it.
Yeah.
Now I'm
same,
more
actually.
mature, I'm more grown, so I can get into it.
Mhm.
Actually, musically, this song is quite fascinating.
Okay.
So retroactively, I'm not gonna say it's a highlight, but retroactively, it's certainly a song I have a great deal of respect for.
Mhm.
Versus back in the day, I used to just like skip it every chance I had.
She is from Philly. I just looked it up.
Yeah,
Got
so
it.
that's
Okay.
their connection.
Uh-huh.
And then we have Act 4, the end. This is the hidden track. How do you feel about this?
Oh, I don't even know that I heard this record. I didn't have it.
So this song is one of my highlights.
Okay.
It's one of my highlights. It's just I love this song so much. Again, Black Thought's not really talking about anything,
Mhm.
but like the energy of the song and like the beat and like the abstractness of it, for it to just I don't know. It's just Black Thought just spitting. Again, not talking about much, but I don't know. I just happen to really like this song. So
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, so I don't know. What are our closing thoughts about it?
So can I make it a classic?
Oh, yes, please. You know what? Actually, at the start of this episode, I was thinking, hey, I should have afforded you the opportunity to do that because I think on a recent tribute, I think I did that. I did that with Stillmatic,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So why don't you do that? Why don't you make this a classic?
All right. So I got just a few tweaks that I would make to try to make this a classic in my mind because no diss to it, but it's not my favorite album. First, I kind of talked about the 2 ways of kind of setting the stage for characters, right? Either set in reality or set in a fantastic world. I feel like I would set this album in Philly.
I would as well.
Yeah. I would have a song like Where I'm From by Jay-Z, where the roots actually tell us what it's like in Philly. Like, let us know that either it ain't all cheesesteaks in this motherfucker, or, I mean, even if in West Philadelphia, born, like, I don't know, whatever, wherever your Philly is, like, tell me a little bit about how things are where you live. That would be interesting to me. I would leverage a little bit more of their Soulquarian network. I feel like they did that decently, but maybe give me some Bilal, give me, a little D'Angelo, a little Jill Scott, maybe even music, even though I know he's not technically a Soulquarian.
No, we don't need music on that.
Even though he might want to be one, but that's a funny story. But yeah, I would leverage them because a lot of this feels like a jam session or gigging, and clearly those folks are a part of that gigging world that Questlove created.
Yeah.
Next, I would create some specific topics that don't include whack MCs, and I would say you have to write about this. Let's talk about things that are real life things. And you provide your lens as to how, those things matter to you or whatever. And I'm not gonna, give what those topics would be, but I'm just saying, like, let's talk about
I hear you.
Yeah.
I hear you.
Next, I would have a solo Black Thought record where he actually tells us about himself. And, I think that You Got Me, what was a pretty good record of Black Thought telling us about him in relationships. So I wouldn't necessarily make it another relationship record, but something else that tells us about who Black Thought is. I feel like when I hear Questlove talk about Black Thought, in terms of how they were growing up on the podcast, I feel like I'm hearing about someone I've never heard before. So like, he talks about Black Thought as this like kind of cool, charismatic guy, used to get all the girls, knew everybody, was cool with the thugs, but also cool with the nerds, like blah, blah, blah. Like that's how he describes him.
I can totally see that. Have you ever met him?
No.
I met him briefly. Yeah, I got that vibe as well.
Yeah. It's interesting though, because like, and another thing that Questlove says about Black Thought is that he's very, very stylish. He says that Black Thought wears like only like the top of the top purple label, most expensive designer shit. He said he was on designer shit before any other rapper was on designer shit. And I don't necessarily need him to rap about designer labels or anything like that. But if those things are the things that people that know you describe you as, like, I just give me a song where you tell me anything about yourself so that I feel like I know a little bit more about you.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would also have a solo Malik B record. And in my mind, I visualize this as something similar to like an 8 Million Stories by Fife. Like I
Okay.
like how,
Oh, that would be fun.
yeah, I like how Fife was like, yo, went to Carvel to get a milkshake. Like he's telling you about all these things, but the references that he's giving you in his story, even though it's a super dramatic story, is like, oh, okay, like, Starks got ejected. You know what I mean? Like the things that tell
Mm-hmm.
me a little bit about what you care about in your story.
Gotcha.
So I would have a quick groove style instrumental somewhere, and you, it sounds like you kind of give the cellist record a little
Yeah.
bit of that, but like give me one where like it's just jamming with no rhymes on it. You can even, if you want, you want to have like D'Angelo on the vocals just in a muted way, like just to kind of give it some words, cool, but like give me one record where it's not lyrical miracle spiritual, but like we let it breathe a little bit. And then I would include Jill Scott's version of You Got Me as a bonus cut. And then I would sell a single with both versions with alternating covers. So, similar to how they did with their covers, because I think that their covers is really unique. It'd be cool if like there was a cover, like some sort of conceptual cover with Jill Scott on it and some sort of a conceptual cover with Erykah Badu on it. And then people could buy the single, but depending on, who they're more aligned with or what cover they like better, they can buy either single. I think that would be like a good promotional thing. So those are my changes.
I feel you. I agree with a lot of them. For me, the biggest one is just the subject matter.
Yeah.
Right? You need to have. I'm not saying you can't have songs like Dynamite and Next Movement and Double Trouble, because I think they're really, really good songs, and they add to it. But there were so many opportunities where you could have had things really aligned with Things Fall Apart, and not necessarily the album covers, right? Because you could argue that the album covers are a result of Things Falling Apart. I would more go towards what's the name? Chinua
Achebe.
Achebe? Yeah, Chinua Achebe, right? I would more go towards that, the album, the theme of that book.
Yeah,
where it's
agree.
like, how did we get undone from within, to be susceptible from the external forces that are ripping us apart.
Right.
And if they kind of do that with hip hop. So it's like, okay, if it's going to be about like Black people and the relationship with hip hop and how we came undone, give me more of that. But they don't really, like, you kind of have like some bars, but like structurally, give me something more concrete.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, you make a good point. That title, first of all, is an excellent title. And it's a great reference to a book, and it's a great reference to where the Roots see themselves in terms of how hip hop moves, right?
And their name is The Roots.
Right. But I think that intro does a better job of aligning to what Things Fall Apart is about than anything else on the body of the album. So I completely agree with what you're saying.
Yeah. So all right. Well, I think that should wrap it up for our tribute / make it a classic for Things Fall Apart, which is an album that I love.
Yeah.
And I wanted to cover this, I think, back in like 2019, but we never got around to it. For the 20 year. But there's still some other Roots projects I would like to do. I think maybe a Put You Up for Do You Want More would be really interesting. Have you? How familiar are you with Do You Want More?
I haven't listened to it since high school.
Oh, okay. That was one of the one I had that in my rotation a lot.
Okay.
So yeah, very fond of that album. But maybe even like a Make It a Classic for Phrenology. And I think that Nate said that that's his favorite Roots album.
Okay.
We could even do like a tribute for Rising Down.
Yeah.
And for me, Tipping Point is an album that I think is rife for like a Make It a Classic, because there's so much potential and missed opportunities in that album.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I'm not saying we have to cover all or any of these projects, but this is, we've been doing the podcast for 6 years now, and this is the 5-6 years,
Yeah.
is the first time we're actually talking about a dedicated Roots project
Yeah.
or dedicated an episode to the Roots. It's far too long. So anyway,
Yeah, that's real. They caught shots in the salute me or shoot me early on, but other than that, we haven't
they
talked
did.
about them a lot.
Yeah. So
All right.
all right, yo. Well, yeah, that should wrap it up. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Peace.
Peace.